What up, Wizards? It's Dev, SBMTG. You know what? We like it a Magic. We really do, especially on days like this, because it's one of the increasingly rare good days in these trying times. But I figured that even though I haven't shaved in so long that I'm getting unintended pork chop sideburns, this happens to me and I hate it. And I think at least part of my tongue is blue too right now, because I've been eating these Nerds gummy clusters. Hashtag not sponsored, although I would take it, because these are unironically amazing. So Nerds, give me a call. Whoever makes Nerds, I'm not really sure. But anyway, despite all the problems with my appearance, is what I'm trying to say, I figured I'd jump on camera anyway because we finally have something positive to discuss. Now, in case you haven't seen this because you're really busy, and I know you are, I understand that about you, Dominaria Remastered got fully previewed just the other day. We know every single card's going to be in this set, even though it's not going to come out until January 13th. You'd think they would release it for the holiday season, but I guess they're like, well, you're releasing too much stuff already. let's give it a couple of weeks after Christmas. But in any case, the set comes out a couple of weeks into January, but we have already seen every card from it. And let me go ahead and give you like my main takeaway. This set should have just been Magic 30th Anniversary Edition. And I'm not the only one with this take. It seems like a majority, at least, of the community is just as united in their love of Dominaria Remastered as they were in their hatred of Magic 30th, right? But even then, you'd see defenders of Magic 30th in comment sections and stuff like, actually, it's just not for you. It is a good product. It's for collectors. It is an honest business, and the whole rundown. But I don't really see that analog with Dominaria Remastered. Some guy up on his soapbox like, I don't want this. That's not really... Most of us seem to like Dominaria Remastered, and there's a reason for that. I mean, you talk about a celebration of everything that has made Magic the Gathering over the last 30 years, and it's Dominaria Remastered. They did a really good job with this set, and I can't point out every single card in the set as much as I'd like to. So today we're just going to talk about 20 cards from the set that I really, really, really like. So let's do it. Let's it's going to be a different top 20. You'll see. Let's talk about the top 20 cards that I'm excited about in a set full of ridiculously exciting cards. Now, like any list on this channel, we got some honorable mentions for you. Some cards that aren't necessarily good enough to mention on the main list, but they still make you think. That's why they have the same initials as But anyway, so stupid. But anyway, I'm not going to be a weirdo this time and do the honorable mentions like right before the top 3 or something. We're just going to get into these because there's a few cards that I just didn't have another place to put on this list. And they're all uncommon downshifts. I at least want to point the fact that a lot of these exist out. I want to point the fact that a lot of these exist out. English, I guess that counts. But either way, there's some really fascinating uncommon downshifts in this set. Spectral Lynx is now an uncommon. It's just a card that I really liked back in the day. It's going to be a lot of these cards today, like Mesa Enchantress. This makes sense as an uncommon, but it was always a rare, and it's one of my favorite white cards of all time. In case you haven't followed the channel, one of my favorite cards, period, ever is Verduran Enchantress. It's just a white Verduran Enchantress, so I've really always liked this card. But there's other stuff like Call of the Herd, which was a ridiculously good card back in the day. And speaking of ridiculously good cards back in the day that I feared, stuff like Damping Sphere is now uncommon, truly an iconic card. And even Spirit Monger. I never would have thought that this card could ever be uncommon. I used to have dreams a Spirit Monger come to my house, kill my whole family. But now he's kinder and gentler. He's an uncommon. That's how far we've come in terms of pushed creature design, is that Spirit Monger gets to be an uncommon. And that is just amazing to me. So none of these could really get brought up in the real list or anything, but they have really been pushing design, it turns out, in such a way that things like Spirit Monger and Mesa Enchantress and freaking Damping Sphere can be uncommons now. For instance, let's move on to the actual list here, but you'll see that this is probably going to go relatively quick, much quicker than the average top 20 list, because again, we're going to do things slightly differently today. We're going to kind of go by category. So our first category is retro frames that I like. And honestly, I feel like there should be more of these. I really do. I mean, they just They just used a lot of really good slots for retro frames on like Brothers War Commander cards. I think Brittany got me both Brothers War Commander retro frame decks for Christmas. I'm hoping so hard because I want those retro frame cards, man. But as a result, maybe they didn't put as many like cool new retro frames into this set. And there are a bunch of new retro frames, but there's only a few that really stand out to me as cards we didn't already have retro frames for, or that I have a special love for, like Jol-Real. In case you didn't know this, I actually have 4 pre-release foil copies of Jol-Real from back in the day. I didn't quite collect this card, but I wanted 4 copies, and I wanted it to be like the quote-unquote nicest version of the card that you could get, because I really liked Jolriel, you know? I really like the Mirage callback. She's just cool in general. She makes cats. You know I'm going to like that. She's a 2-drop with like tons of value that makes more 2/2s, and just like everything about the card was perfect for like how I like to play Magic, right? So I just loved this card since the moment it was spoiled, but now I have to get a playset of retro frames. It's just that she looks really, really good in the retro frame. She always has sort of seemed like a more retro-y card, probably just because of the Mirage tie-ins, right? So I've just loved this card for a couple of years now, and I probably won't have to get a playset, but we're at least getting a copy for Commander decks and a copy for the Cube. So I'm coming for a couple of copies of you, Jolriel, one of my favorite cards of the last 3 years, and now we get just the best possible version of it. In case you don't know, I really like retro frames. I know not everybody shares this love, but I am one who just digs these so much, dude, especially the gold retro frame. I know, we're moving on from Jolriel. I'm not saying she's a gold card. I'm not that dumb. My favorite card, she's gold. It turns out she's green. No, we're also going to talk a little bit about Zur here. Zur just looks really good in a retro frame. And to my knowledge, we didn't have access to this before. Again, the gold retro frame just looks so good. It looks like the Legends sort of, or possibly a good medium between like the Legends and Ice Age gold frames, right? And it just looks incredible to me. And Zur is one of my favorite, it's not one of my favorite commanders, but it's in my top 25 or 50 commanders, like of all time, and probably in my top 25 or 50 characters of all time. Should I do that list? Top 25 dev commanders? It sounds fun. But Zur would probably make that list. As a matter of fact, both versions of Zur. They could have given us either Zur and I would have been happy. So I don't really mind that we got this one and not the newer one that I actually kind of like more. Don't tell anybody. But either way, this card just looks very handsome in a retro frame, and I'll take it. Aside from that, I think the obvious one here is check lands. From what I understand, we didn't get all the check lands. We only got 5 of them, the off-color ones or whatever. But it is nice to have some of these in a retro frame for basically the first time. You know, we got like Caves of Koilos in a retro frame, and I believe that's the first time ever. Not Caves of Koilos, but Isolated Chapel. Excuse me, comment section. We got Isolated Chapel in a retro frame, which looks really good. Matter of fact, all of these do. Like Clifftop Retreat looks really good in a retro frame. But let's move on to the next section, which is, I've named it Cards I Need to Get Out of the Way. These are extremely high-profile reprints in this set. And even though I might be more excited about like retro frame Jolriel or whatever, I assume that a lot of players are going to be most excited about all of the various reprints in the set that are the most important things to get reprinted. Right. The most expensive stuff, the most iconic stuff, the stuff everyone's looking for a copy of and they can't get it, right? So hopefully Dominaria Remastered will help with that. But I've made this kind of our middle section of the video because even though these are all cards that are, again, like super high profile needed reprints to bring down costs and all that, I still am a little bit bored by things like Chain Lightning getting reprinted. In the set number 17, I guess, technically, is Chain Lightning. And I guess that's good. It's good. But if you look it up on like TCG Player, Scryfall, whatever, you'll see there's like a million printings of Chain Lightning. So it's just really cool to be able to like draft a Chain Lightning and play it. Drafting the set is going to be like bonkers. It's going to be really fun to draft this set. I'll tell you that right now. But, you know, Chain Lightning is a pretty cool reprint. But is it that special? Same thing with like Sneak Attack. This has not been reprinted that often. To be honest, but it has been reprinted a couple of times. And even though it's a massively expensive card that's important in, you know, at least Legacy, or Vintage, really, I think. It's just here. I'm glad that it's here. Needed the reprint. I'm going to just repeat myself about like every single one of these because this is one of the bigger sections in the video. But there's also Bop, you know, Birds of Paradise is here in a retro frame. You've seen the side-by-sides of the retro frame Dominaria Remastered birds next to the 30th anniversary edition birds, and they look exactly the same, which is like kind of funny to me, you know. Maybe don't spend whatever ridiculous $800 or whatever, like a Birds of Paradise from 30th. When you get a Birds with the exact same nice little retro frame for, I don't know how much, but probably $10, give or take a couple of bucks. So something like that. And it's going to look nice too. If you want a good looking Birds though, honestly, just get like a revised edition Birds moderately played or heavily played for like $8.50. They're out there. It's not hard to get, and they're going to look better than this. But aside from that, there's also Force of Will, right? And it's been reprinted a few times, but mostly like promos and like a Judge's foil, I think. That's like $1 million. So it hasn't been reprinted a whole lot in like sets that people are actually going to open and stuff. So it's nice to see it here. Yeah, it is. It's going to be cool to have like this art, but on a retro frame. I get it. It's going to be fun. Aside from that, there's Maze of Ith, which is one of my favorite Magic cards. I can say that for real. One of my actual favorite Magic cards of all time. There used to be one up here for the longest time, and then it got absorbed into the cube. But yeah, believe it or not, Maze of Ith is easily my favorite card from the Dark, and the Dark is my favorite set of all time. So Maze of Ith occupies a very important spot in my heart. That said, the only good-looking version of Maze of Ith ever has been the original one from the Dark, and I don't really like the new art or anything like that on this, but again, I really like the idea of drafting a Maze of Ith or getting a cheap one for Cube or Commander. But how cheap is it going to really be? You know, I've already seen where the full art or whatever, like the full new art version from Dominaria Remastered, looks to be selling for more on pre-order than the one from the Dark. It's like just order one from the Dark for like $10, heavily played. It's a good buy. But anyway, we also got Exploration, which really has not been reprinted enough. So it's good to see here. And honestly, this one almost made it into our next section, but I feel like Exploration is it's almost too iconic for me to be that excited about, which I know is like super backwards, but I'm backwards and I get more excited about like obscure, cool, good cards that people don't know enough about that really needed reprints, because even though they're obscure, they're still expensive because they only have 1 or 2 printings. Exploration has more than 1 or 2 printings, but not much more. So I am excited about this card being in the set. And Exploration is a banger of a card. But aside from that, there's Sylvan Library at technically number 11, I guess. Sylvan Library is a card that I love more than almost any other green card ever printed in the history of time. And it too has a fair number of printings, but they just all refuse to budge below $30. And I really hope that this budges the price of one or the other of them. If anything, you get this one for hopefully relatively cheap, but it is a mythic, so I'm not really sure how accurate that statement is. I'm not sure that any copy of Sylvan Library is ever going to go under $30 so I can actually own one. Haven't owned a Sylvan Library since 1997. Thanks, Ryan, my old friend I traded my Sylvan Library to. I wish I'd never done that. But anyway, and then he ended up getting a Waddle's Bibliothek, the German version of Sylvan Library, which is now worth like $250. So this gets screwed all the way around on that one. I wish I'd have gotten the Waddle's Bibliothek, but anyway, I love Sylvan Library a lot. It's actually one of the best green cards ever printed. If you play green and Commander, you probably want to run this almost no matter what you're doing. The problem is that it's $35. So again, hopefully this brings it down. I've talked too long about Sylvan Library. I love it. And then number 10, I guess to technically kick off the top 10, Tutors. I guess that the positioning of a card on this category on the list is all about my subjective excitement for it. You know, like I'm more excited for Maze of Ith than I am Bob. I'm more excited for Exploration than I am, Force of Will or whatever. And I'm more excited for Sylvan Library than a lot of these, but I'm most excited for reprints of these tutors. And they all get like cool art, like the Mystical Tutor looks great. The Enlightened Tutor even looks great. Just pulling a book off the shelf or whatever it's doing, if I recall that art correctly. Worldly Tutor getting a reprint. I mean, all of these are cards that need reprints like every single year. They just hold a ridiculous amount of value. And even though the ones from like, Mirage or whatever, the original ones, Mirage Visions, those tutors are all like still the best looking ones. They're still the most nostalgic ones. They're the ones I want to own the most. I'll take a copy of Worldly Tutor from this set. If it's like $8 to $12, I might end up doing that. So, because the tutors have just gotten crazy, and just about every Commander deck needs them. Just about every cube needs them, old school or not. So anytime I see reprints of these, I get really excited. And then the final section of the video, which constitutes nearly the entirety of the top 10, is cards that don't have enough reprints. Again, there are some things that could have been in here, like Exploration could have been in this section, but it just barely didn't make it. I think that there are some more either obscure cards that needed the reprints more, or they're just cards that only ever have one printing period that we needed more printings of. And I think a lot of these really fit the bill, like Mystic Remora. Again, this just got a reprint, amazingly enough, so that's why it's like number 9, because it just got a reprint. But before then, it hadn't gotten a reprint since like Ice Age. Some people call it like the poor man's Ristic Study. I think it's the better man's Ristic Study. Either way, Mystic Remora is a sweet card, doesn't get enough attention, and people are just over the last few years remembering that this card ever existed in the first place. And I've always loved Mystic Remora, especially that original Ice Age art. You can make all these cool new arts for it, but I like the fish. Just the jumping fish. That's what a Remora is. But number 8, I guess, is Cryptic Gateway. This is a card that somehow only ever had one printing period, and yet is only a few bucks. This card's only like $4, but if people are reminded of this card's existence, I feel like it will creep up. This is a really important card, you would think, for commander decks that care about creature types. Just about any deck that cares about creature types might want to run this thing right. So I'm just a little surprised that this thing still holds a relatively low value, but it still needed a reprint because it only ever got printed like the one time. It's just a really interesting card. Aside from that, Nut Collector. Inappropriate jokes. I will say, I said on Twitter that I wondered if there was like internal debate over whether or not this set slot should have gone to Deranged Hermit. And somebody reminded me Deranged Hermit's on the reserve list for some stupid reason. It's a silly thing to be on the reserve list. But yeah, that is probably why Nut Collector made it in instead. It's because they literally can't print Deranged Hermit into a legal set, right? At least not for now. But I would have thought this would have been, obviously this is supposed to be a nod, you know. It's like we would have put Deranged Hermit in if we could. We know you love that card, Dev, and everybody else. But Nut Collector is still a pretty good one to have. It was trending up in price over the last like really few months here. And it's only ever had one printing too. So good to see Nut Collector in here, I guess. Number 6 is Opposition, which has had like a few reprintings. But this is where the subjective nature of a YouTube list rears its ugly head. I just love Opposition. I love it so much. I've had multiple, Sunday tournament decks built around this card. Back in the day, I actually went to a Pro Tour qualifier with a deck that played like Telekinetic Sliver, which is the Opposition Sliver, and then the Brine Elemental Vesuvian Doppelganger combo. I've told this story before. One of my biggest mistakes ever trying to be a professional Magic player was missing the upkeep trigger on a Vesuvian Doppelganger, and my opponent wouldn't let me go back, which is the correct thing to do. Don't let your opponent go back. So they got to unlock and untap, and then they won, and it's knocked me down to 3-2 on the day, and I was basically out. So that's a whole story. But because of not only Telekinetic Sliver, but the OG Opposition, I have an awful lot of love, dude, for this card. So I'm just happy it gets another reprint. It is way too expensive. It just is. But aside from that, Helm of Awakening is number 5. This only ever had one printing ever, which is just like unbelievable how iconic this card is. It's also unbelievable the card is relatively low value, honestly. Even the original, I think, Visions, don't quote me. The original Visions version, I hope I'm right, is only a few bucks nowadays. But that's nuts. It's so nuts. That card is so cheap, man. This is not only an iconic card, but an important card for a lot of commander decks, obviously. And a nice little one for your cube, too, if you're trying to go old school. So I'm just glad this card got reprinted is all. Aside from that, number 4 is Oversold Cemetery. The cool thing about this is that not only does this not have enough printings, not only is it an incredible commander card that people are just discovering over the last 3 years or so, but also we get Drew Tucker art in the year of our Lord 2022. That's just Drew Tucker illustrated some of the most iconic pieces of my childhood. And he was either that guy that people understood as like an abstract expressionist in some ways. People were like, oh, I get what this is supposed to, okay, I get what he's trying to do with this, and this looks neat, and I like his style, he's got good steez. Or people are like, this looks like mud. So there were very polarizing opinions on Drew Tucker, but I was always on the I like Drew Tucker side of things. His art for like Chaos Moon and a bunch of other stuff is just among some of the best looking Magic art of all time. So it's really nice to see Tucker doing a piece in 2022. And not only that, it's freaking Oversold Cemetery. So I'm happy about this one. It needed a reprint. Aside from that, number 3 is Zera Arian. I actually bought a copy of this card like 3 months ago. From Legends, because it's still only like $4 from Legends. My copy was heavily played, and it was like $2.50. It was such a steal for like one of the coolest Jund commanders you could possibly own. Maybe not the best Jund commander you can own, but if you want either a commander or one for the 99 in your Jund list that actually just like draws cards on a stick, you're not going to get that very much in Jund. You're really just not. So it's not actually too terrible in your Jund decks, and it's cool. It's a bug lady with swords and stuff. It's awesome. So, I don't know how important this is as a reprint. to be honest, because, you know, the original Legends version is relatively, you just pick up a copy of that. But it's just cool to see this. It is really cool to see not only like one of the Legends from Legends, but it's not one of the vanilla ones. It's one that actually does stuff and people like. So it's just cool to see. But number 2 is arguably the most obscure card that needed a reprint in the entire set, and that's Hunting Grounds. I'm going to give you a second to read the text on this card, in case you don't know. It's such a good card. It's a good card, man. I mean, it can't be too hard to get Threshold. By the way, in case you couldn't read the card, you're at work, you're cooking, you're driving, whatever. It's basically got Threshold. And once you have Threshold, which is you have 7 cards in your graveyard. Once you have Threshold, whenever an opponent casts a spell, you just get to throw a creature card from your hand into play. You're not even casting it. It just says, like, put a creature card from your hand onto the battlefield. Just like, whenever they cast a spell, that should be pretty useful, you know? Shouldn't be too hard to get Threshold in the game of Commander either. It's just like, whew. The first time I read this was, well, 20 years ago, something like that, but I hadn't read it and I'd completely forgotten it existed until I saw it in Dominaria Remastered. And I had to pull out the fan and, whew, my lord, I'm getting the vapors. The card is just ridiculous. And it turns out that it was slowly trending up over the last really year or so. So Wizards or Hasbro or whatever knew this card needed a reprint. They finally gave us one after how long? The card was from Judgment, like 20 years. So they finally gave us the reprint we needed. And I'm glad that we got it. Reintroducing a whole slew of players to Hunting Grounds is either going to be really fun or actually a terrible time for a lot of Commander tables. I guess we'll see. But you want to talk about a green card that needed a reprint, has only been printed once ever, and is going to be annoying at the Commander table? In case you've never seen it, let me reintroduce you to Arborea. Somehow, this card isn't on the reserve list. It was first printed in Legends, and only ever in Legends, period. So, like, Zero Arian or whatever, that's at least got a Chronicles printing, you know? Like, this was only ever printed in Legends, and it does something really, really interesting. Now, the fact that it's not on the reserve list means that it's, I believe, a rare from, correct me if I'm wrong, I may be, but it sure does, the effect sure as heck does look rare, but in any case, it's a card from Legends that does something super interesting, especially on the Commander table. And it's only like $20 market price, which is unbelievable. So it's not like they're going to break anything by reprinting this. And it's not like the card needed a reprint for price controls or anything. It's just easily, to my mind, the coolest reprint in the entire set. They went all out and they reprinted a thing that is not only actually useful in a game of Magic, but also is from a set from the extremely early days that they've never, ever reprinted before. And I just think that's really awesome, you know? Like right now, I think on pre-order, Arborea is about $10 from Dominaria Remastered. Meanwhile, you can get a damaged or heavily played one for about $13 or $14 on TCG Player. So you make the call. I think that one is probably more worth having than the other, right? But, and for just in case you can't read between the lines, it's the Legends one. But it's still, I think it's really sweet that they did reprint this card. If you open an Arborea, you at least have one for your Commander decks. And you know, you'd had to spend a lot of money to get that before. And either way, if you really want an Arborea on for the cheapest price possible, it's going to be the one from this set because there's really only one option aside from that. But in those, like, start out as group hugs, end up being pillow fort decks, you know, those Commander fog decks or whatever. This has always been a pretty cool card to have access to, and now it's easier to get your hands on than ever. You guys would like let me know if I had something in the corners of my mouth, right? I'm always paralyzed that I might. I feel like for the last like 5 minutes of recent video, like one of the ones where I'm talking about Hasbro, had some crap in the corner of my mouth. And I felt like it devalued the entire video, so I'm just always worried. But anyway, that's pretty much all I got for this one. There's a bunch of other awesome cards in this set. I can promise you that. Just go through. I'll leave the link to a spoiler site. I haven't decided if it's going to be Mythic Spoiler or MTG Previews or both, but I'll leave a link to a spoiler site down there in the description. You can peruse the set at your leisure because there are a ton of incredible freaking cards in this set. Again, if you played Magic either for the last 30 years or any time in the last 30 years, there's going to be cards in the set that are basically put there for you. But can I do self-promotion with a mouthful of Nerds Root? Let's find out. Oh, there's like 8 of them. All right, I finally finished the Nerds Gummy Candies. There's like a good 90 seconds in between the last take and this take. It's just me chewing on candy. But anyway, I think I've got that pretty much squared away at this point. So just let me know how you felt about all this stuff, and I guess I'll catch you cats later. I am Deb from The Place. Thanks for watching, Wizards. Spread love and be kind.